Welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen, to College Football Pros. I am your host, as always, Nicholas Valencia, joined at this time by Drew Van Jura. We've been talking about the Pac-12. We covered the North on the last episode. We'll cover the South this time. So what do you have to say about the South, Drew?
I think it's very, very balanced. I think top to bottom, you can almost make an argument for all six of these teams that can be very competitive this year.
I'm going to agree. I think there's some obvious situations that stick out to me that cause me to say they won't make it, but you have to understand at the same time, I'm already very biased on this side because in my mind, one team already has it wrapped up, and I would have to think that whoever wins this conference pretty much has a 90% shot at the playoffs. Would you agree?
Oh, hands down. I mean, you look at, Oregon on the other side, and I think, whoever wins this side, I think there's three teams that have a legit chance to win the whole side. I think both of our number ones that we'll talk about in a second have the majority of the chance, but this is a very, very fun conference to talk about. I'm really excited to talk about this side specifically.
So I think we can agree in terms of the college football playoffs. It's highly unlikely that we're going to see a non-Power 5 team in unless they're just an absolutely century team, right?
No, I mean we've talked about that in previous podcasts. You go check that out, but it's never going to happen where you see a Power 5 or non-Power 5 team get in. You'll never see it.
So there's five Power 5 conferences. Obviously, that's why it's named. However, I mean, Notre Dame is an independent, and I could definitely see a situation where a Notre Dame football team could be in the college football playoff tournament. My question to you is, do you think there will develop a bias as years go on where certain conferences almost have like that guaranteed spot in the tournament?
Yeah, you look at it, I mean, last year with the first year of it and this year, I think the SEC, because they're the SEC, I think if you just say you're from the SEC, you're getting an invite. I think that's completely wrong. And I think, in my personal opinion, the SEC could get left out this year. But, I mean, we'll see what happens at the end of the year. But I hate that narrative. And you're absolutely right that there is a bias already heading into the season where, the SEC has some really good teams, so they're probably going to get in. So we'll put whoever wins that conference for sure in. But how do you know at the end of the season if you're sitting here with 3 losses, and these other teams have 1 to 0 losses? How do you say that? So I think that's an interesting narrative that the media takes in that.
So let's talk about that briefly, because that got me pretty worked up the other day listening to both Gus Malzahn and Brett Bielema pretty much saying that there's no way that 4 teams is the right way to do the college football playoffs and that 8 teams is ideal. And Malzahn, if I'm not mistaken, directly said that will all but assure that 2 of our teams will make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, and that is a asinine statement. However, at the same time, it's not an inaccurate one because the media loves and the press loves the SEC. Yeah, if you go to 8 teams, you probably are getting 2 SEC teams in. I hate that. I don't think that's remotely close to being how it should be. But unfortunately, in today's day and age, that's the way it is. I can make an argument that there's 2 Pac-12 teams, for the 4-team playoff. Do I firmly believe that's going to happen? No, but I can make an argument for it. And you have people in the SEC saying, it should be an all SEC playoff, which is even more asinine. So, yeah, and it's horrible to say.
What do you think the SEC coaches' reactions were to the Amway coaches poll that came out that had 2 Big 12 teams in the top 4?
They should have zero argument with it.
Did their head I'm assuming some of their heads had to explode.
I'm sure their egos were like, how the hell did that happen? But, I mean, you look at Ohio State, Baylor, TCU. I mean, I don't see an SEC team better than any 3 of those teams. And I'm not high on Baylor, but at the same time, you put them in the SEC, they win the SEC. They're just going to put up more points than anybody, and their defense is just good enough. So
that's definitely a bold statement, man.
I do. Is Alabama going to beat them? Is LSU going to beat them? No. LSU can't put up enough points. Alabama can't stop them enough. They might be able to put up enough points if they can get their quarterback position figured out. But I don't see how any SEC fan or media member can argue that they shouldn't be in the top 3. They shouldn't. They just straight up shouldn't.
Well, I actually did some research, and I'm in the process of writing a blog that I will make available to all of my and our listeners about this, because I'm fired up. I don't want the SEC to tell me that'll all but ensure 2 of your teams get in. I don't care if you want 2 of your teams in. Like, who designed this so that you guys were the focus? What goes on in your mind that thinks the SEC has to be the focus for college football world to revolve? Are they're the nucleus of college football? There would be no college football without the SEC, because we have to remember there was a time where that wasn't that much of an important thing. There were other teams from different conferences that were doing big things. My research indicated that in the last 9 years, had there been a 4-team college football playoff, that 9 out of 10 years there would have been an SEC representative. 5 of those 10 years, there would have been 2 SEC representatives. And you're complaining that you need to move to 8 to guarantee that there's 2 SEC teams involved.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time many, many moons ago where the SEC was a laughable conference. I mean, after Bear Bryant, left, and after, in the 80s, it was Miami, it was Oklahoma, it was Nebraska. I mean, there's no SEC team that was really relevant. And by that, I mean winning championships. So, I have such a hatred towards the SEC that it's unbelievable. I think they're overrated. And I think that anybody, just because they're from an SEC school, they're better than a player from the ACC or Big Ten, I think is a laughable statement. And guys go to the Combine, and I've talked to people from the Combine, players from around this valley that have said that, guys come in from the SEC from lower echelon teams, and they're like, well, we're from the SEC, so we're better than you. I mean, you're not. I mean, you went to, X school at the bottom half of the SEC, so that doesn't mean you're better than a guy from Miami or better than a guy from Texas A&M, or at the time, when they're in the Big 12. You know what I mean?
I'd like to know what I'd like to hear Trent Richardson talk about how his pedigree has helped him thus far his career, where he peaked the first year.
Who is he? Does he even play for the NFL anymore?
He plays for Oakland, but he's on the NFI list. We're probably going to cut him when we're ready to, and he'll go play college football. He'll go play arena football somewhere.
It's laughable to say that just because you're from the SEC, you're better. I mean, look at the Alabama supposed pedigree for the NFL. When's the last NFL quarterback from Alabama? Can you name it?
Joe Namath.
Okay, I'll give it to you. I'll give you Joe freaking Willie Namath. That's fine.
Well, I'm just saying, if that's all I could come up with, we're talking about eons.
Seriously, no. I mean, it's.
I mean, I'm not really thinking. I personally don't know, due to the fact that I don't have that knowledge. But there's. And the biggest thing is, I'm not a supporter of an expanded playoff, right? We've been through this already, but you are a supporter of an expanded playoff, and I'm sure in your mind, you're probably thinking to yourself, like, I'm ready to jump off of this ship just because I don't want to see this happen, just because this is where we're going toward.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to sit here and say we expanded to 8 teams, so 3 of those teams have to be from the SEC.
I'm going to tell you right now, if it was expanded, I don't have the statistics right in front of me because I didn't intend on bringing this up today, but again, over a 10-year span, there would have been as many as 5 SEC teams in an 8-team playoff in the last 10 years. There are multiple occasions where there would be 3 or 4. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to see that.
No, I don't either. But I think you also look at the media bias towards the SEC the past couple of years. I mean, they've won it, the past 7 years before Ohio State? They won the title. Right. So whether or not they deserved it or not, USC was down, Ohio State was down those years, last couple of years. Your Oklahoma has been horrible. I don't know. There's just no tradition. When you go back to the Baylors of the world, why not? Why does it have to be, always about the SEC? Why not teams from the non-Power 5 teams? What if we went to an 8-team playoff and one of those spots were locked in for a non-Power 5 conference team? So your highest ranked non-Power 5 team automatically gets into the playoffs. Why not? But people
I'm not
in the
disagreement with
SEC
you.
would go.
Let's ask a serious question. What would have happened? And I might be completely off. What would have happened if a Boise State team got in and had to play someone like an Oregon last year? That Boise State team was not a bad football team. That Boise State team knew how to score points.
Yeah.
Oregon knew how to give up points. There's a situation where you could have seen Oregon upset very quickly. I might be in the minority who feels that way, but I'm legitimately telling you, we saw Virginia Tech knock off Ohio State. There were many other games last year, if we really wanted to stop, talk, and think about it, where the underdog ended up the victor. You don't want to go this route. If you're doing it just for just to try to ensure that you have more hats in the race so that, hey, at least if we don't win, someone else from the SEC does. I feel like that's what's happening here. I feel like Alabama they lost to Ohio State, and the SEC coaches are not, well, we need to expand it because, there was an opportunity if we had another team in there that they would have played Ohio State and won. Like, that's not relevant. You have to know that that's not relevant. So
and
what?
The SEC has
for
more
5
excuses.
years, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It angers me so much. There is talent there. There are talented football players. There are talented programs. They're fun to watch. But to try to isolate yourself like you're the end-all, be-all of college football, it's a joke. And we saw that when you were knocked out in the first round.
Couldn't agree more.
So that was a good intro, having very little to deal with the Pac-12, but still we try to keep it fresh and exciting for you. And that's something, when we see comments like that, we're gonna abandon the script to start things off. We've got 30 minutes. We could still talk to you about the Pac-12 South, so we're good to go. We're not in a hurry. You're going to get all the information you need. You can take notes. You can try to plot out what your fantasy plays will be, or just get ready and excited for the season. But when relevant stuff like this comes out, we have to talk about it, especially when it's stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So the SEC is stupid. Anyway, I'm sure that'll get a lot of thumbs up and likes and follows on our social media sites, but
hope so.
The reality of the situation is, look, you guys have to understand to look beyond what your focus is. If all you're looking at is the SEC, you're missing out on a lot of good stuff out there. If all you're looking at is a Power 5, you're missing out on a lot of good stuff out there. A part of our job is to give you that knowledge to help you fish. The old adage, you could catch a fish. I forget it. I'm not even going to go into it. But we're trying to teach you how to fish. We're not going to catch the fish for you. We're trying to teach you how to fish. We're trying to teach you that college football is good all around. It's fun. There's things other than the SEC, other than the Big Ten, other than the Pac-12. Embrace it. Help it grow. Get involved, buy stuff for those other teams, watch them on ESPN, because the more interest that the networks notice people are taking in it, the more they're going to be willing to spend on this content, the more that they're going to be interested in expanding their portfolio of college football offerings. So I can't say that enough, to just expand your horizons and be willing to take into consideration what you haven't in the past.
Could not agree more with those statements. I mean, honestly, I can't say much more to that, because you hit every nail on the head, honestly.
I tried. It took me a while. 13 minutes in, I think we finally covered everything we wanted to say to get it off our chest.
Yeah. There will be more.
Yes. Oh, there will be. There will be more. Arizona starts out the Pac-12 South. They had the 21st ranked passing offense, the 47th ranked rushing offense, the 26th ranked overall offense. They were the 8th worst passing defense in the country, the 70th ranked rushing defense, the 105th ranked overall defense. They scored 34.5 points, allowed 28.2, and they were an exciting football team in 2014.
They were, and Rich Rodriguez coming into this program now in his 4th year, and he's 26-14, and this is, I mean, his system, the high school coaches around that area have just bought into everything that he's saying. And this team with a new Solomon, at the quarterback position, he may not be the fastest or, most fleet of foot guy in the world, but he has a cannon for an arm, and he's a proven winner, 57-3 with 4 state championships in high school. Kid knows how to win. So this is a guy that I'm so excited to see in this offense this year, because he brings so much to the table, and he is a prototypical Rich Rodriguez type quarterback and game manager, where he may not win you the game, but he's probably not going to lose you the game either.
Sky's the limit on this kid in this offense. 3,800 yards and 30 total scores last year. Nothing to suggest that anything should change to the negative this year. We see some departures on the O-line, but they bring in some highly talented recruits to replace, so that's a plus. One of my favorite players in all of last year was Nick Wilson, coming in when Terrace Jones-Grigsby went down and just really, really putting together a strong season. I think coming back this year, and this year he doesn't have to worry about Grigsby behind him. I think the sky's the limit for what he can really attain here, and he could end up being one of those guys that ends up at the top of the country in the leaderboards for rushing statistics at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he rushed for 1,300 yards last year as a freshman, obviously sharing time with Grigsby when he was healthy and in that mix there. But this is a guy I really think could break that 1,700-yard mark, maybe 15 to 20 touchdowns, and he's a good ball catcher out of the backfield. So that'll really help Solomon in that team. I mean, Caleb Jones as a receiver, I think, is going to have a fantastic year if Solomon takes that next step. So this offense, man, this Rich Rodriguez-type offense, it's going to be a blast to watch.
It is, and I don't want to leave out Samaje Grant. And overall, I think there's an opportunity that there's 4,000 yards passing at the end of the year. It really could end up like that. Last year, it was a really bad defense. The defensive backs lose a lot of experience, and they were already the 8th worst in college football. So on one hand, you're losing starters. On the other hand, these were starters that were getting burned.
Yeah, so, I mean, linebacker Scooby Wright, one of the best in the nation at tackling, 163 tackles. So he's a guy that returns and can really be, the anchor of that defense. Senior defensive end Reggie Gilbert was awarded another year of eligibility with the NCAA. So he's going to anchor that defensive line. And this defense I see getting better, not by leaps and bounds, but better. You
would have to hope so, and I think that the potential is there. I try to not get too excited until I see things transpire on the field, but they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, they are, and they're going to be fun to watch this year.
Keeping the theme of Arizona teams, let's move to Arizona State, who had the 33rd ranked passing offense in 2014, the 58th ranked rushing offense, the 36th overall offense, the 106th ranked passing defense, the 51st ranked rushing defense, the 83rd ranked overall defense. They scored 36.9 points and they allowed 27.9. Taylor Kelly is going to be gone this year, so that's a big loss. Bigger loss is Jaylene Strong moving to the NFL. So there's some high-profile offensive players that they have to replace right off the bat.
Yeah, but when you turn DJ Foster, as a slot receiver, running back, whatever position they'd line him up in, this guy is one of the most dynamic offensive weapons in the nation. And whoever the quarterback is, whether it be Mike
Berkovicki.
God, he's a
Berkovicki.
Can't pronounce that last name. That guy, he is a strong arm guy, so he has potential to be an elite quarterback in college football. DJ Foster is going to be, this is where Arizona State's offense is going to revolve around is Foster.
No question about it. The offensive line returning 8 of 10 players. Huge. Like you said about Foster, he's an everywhere man. I do think the vast majority of his production is going to come in a receiving role. I don't think you're going to see him out of the backfield too much. That leaves Demario Richards, and to a lesser extent, Kalen Ballage. I like both of these guys. I think Richards will have a very, very strong season. I'm just personally a little bit concerned of what you do to replace Jaylene Strong. You might not be able to. That just might be the answer, is there may not be a reasonable replacement. I don't think it can be Cameron Smith. I think he's most likely outside of Foster to take on some of that production. But that is one concern I do have, is he was what made this a threat down the field. Where does that come from this year?
Yeah, I think they have a transfer coming in from UCLA, Devin Lucien. He's a guy who can be a deep threat guy. So I think that's another guy. He was a proven target coming into this offense. So I agree with you. I don't think you can replace Strong's production, but you can balance that out on a receiver core and Foster who can really handle the load. And I'm excited for this offense because I think they have the potential to put up some really big numbers.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I'm looking at the defense, and I'm hoping that the defense could stay where it was at last year. I feel like they had pretty good production. The points allowed didn't get over 30, which is a big deal in the Pac-12 because there are some teams that can score points. So you don't want to – you start giving up points, you're writing your own demise.
Yeah, this defense doesn't really have anybody that stands out, but they've recruited well. Todd Graham's recruited well. And the guys that stepping in from the losses of last year have had some explaining to do. They've had some experience, and they might have some explaining to do if this defense doesn't get better.
I like that. You just mixed in some Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz in there.
Yeah, it's just randomly.
That's good. It came out of nowhere. It was left field. I think it was because you were talking about Devin Lucien. Lucy was in there, was on your mind.
It could be. And it's
makes
all
sense.
Can jumble together in my mind. It's like, spit out I love Lucy comments. All right, sweet.
I think this is definitely going to be an exciting team. I'm looking forward to it. You know, there's not much not to like in the Pac-12.
No, not this side at least. I mean, this side, I think there's some explosive offenses top to bottom, even when you talk about Colorado, who we're talking about next. But, this is a team in Arizona State that can put up some serious numbers, and that on the defensive side of the ball has a capability to be good enough, to compete with USC at the top.
Big time, and like you illustrated, we're going to move on to Colorado, who in 2014 had the 20th ranked passing offense, the 77th ranked rushing offense, the 40th ranked overall offense, the 103rd ranked passing defense, the 104th ranked rushing defense, the 114th ranked overall defense. They scored 28.5 a game, and they allowed 39, which was the 10th most in the country. What needs to change for this Colorado team to take it to the next level?
I don't know if anything can change in the short term. Their defense is going to struggle. They couldn't stop anybody. They haven't recruited well, and I know they're in Colorado where high school football isn't really as big as other things in Colorado. So on the offensive side of the ball, their quarterback, whose name I'm going to let you pronounce because I feel like you have better feel of quarterbacks, in the phonetic pronunciation of those things. But
Hooked on Phonics worked for me.
It did. It didn't work for me. But Nelson Spruce, he's good. I mean, there's nothing really more to say about that.
Yeah, it'll be Sifo Liufau,
there you go,
who will start the year throwing. I think he needs to work on his control. You can't throw 15 picks in the Pac-12 in relation to the amount of touchdowns and succeed. He's got a good skill set. I'm looking at him as a make-or-break guy this year. Nelson Spruce, the receiving situation is really interesting here because in the spring of 2014, all of the hype was on Bryce Bobo in being the candidate to be the leading receiver for this team. Well, what did that translate to? Mediocrity? So this is what I'm saying. Like, I don't like when I hear camp stories, I block them out. Except if you're saying I am starting this person. That's something entirely different. That's the camp news I want to hear. If you're going to start Jeff Locke instead of Vernon Adams, great. I know that is a fact, and it's not coach talk. What coach talk is, Bryce Bobo is really performing out here. Perfect example in the NFL. Brandon Coleman of the New Orleans Saints is doing great in unpadded practice. Question for you, Drew. When is the last time the NFL has played games without pads?
It's been a couple years, I'm going to say. It's been a couple days.
So what is the correlation then between this guy doing good in padless practice and his impact on this team in the year? Because this isn't the first time we've heard about him. It's not the last. Stephen Hill, every year.
Yeah.
Great former college football player. Did he go to Georgia Tech? Did I have that right?
Georgia Tech, yeah, Georgia Tech.
Speedster, gonna come in, gonna do big things, has a great spring, does really well. Season starts, there he is, sitting on the bench.
Vanishes.
Yeah, I don't care what somebody does in the spring. I don't care how good they look in the fall. Give me facts. Facts are what are going to lead you to the right place. So here's my one hesitation with Nelson Spruce. He came out strong, And this offense seemed to just, especially him, just kind of plateaued and just fell off the edge. I don't like that. That shows me that there's an inconsistency there that means these people can't be trusted on a week-in, week-out basis. And you're going to find schools where you know that the players on a week-in, week-out basis are going to be able to produce. And Nelson Spruce is the kind of guy who's lumped at the top with all of the top producing talents. But if you're not doing it on a consistent basis, there's a little bit of irrelevance that starts to kick in there. So I'm really concerned about what they could do on a day-to-day, game-to-game basis with Nelson Spruce. And also I think part of the problem is defenses just figured out, we're just going to cover Nelson Spruce.
Yeah, because they have no running game.
Nothing.
They have zero running game. It doesn't matter who you put back there. Christian Powell, Michael Atkins. It doesn't matter. They're all just there. They're placeholders.
They're warm bodies.
It is Spruce and Lufau. And if Lufau can really be consistent at half the time, and improve, down to maybe 10 interceptions, I think Spruce has another good year. But I agree with what you're saying. When there's 11 guys covering Nelson Spruce, probably hard to, fit the ball in that tight space.
It just ends up making sense. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Moving on, we'll go to UCLA. In 2014, they had the 43rd ranked passing offense, the 34th ranked rushing offense, the 23rd ranked overall offense, the 96th ranked passing defense, the 42nd ranked rushing defense, the 65th ranked overall defense. They scored 33.5 points, and they allowed 28.1. And the news here, Brett Hundley is gone.
Yeah, and everybody's hyping up UCLA this year to be, back to UCLA of old, and they're going to, be the dominant team of, the side with USC. But man, when you have to replace a Brett Hundley, you're starting quarterback for the past couple of years with a true freshman, and that's probably what they're going to go with is Josh Rosen, who's a true freshman coming in. Man, that's a tough sell to me. So this team, while in the preseason is going to be overhyped, I think at the end of the season we're sitting here going, okay, they're 7-8 win team. They're good. The future looks good, but this year, man, I just don't see it.
Totally agree. It's never easy when you lose the face of your football team that Hundley was. I think the quarterback position is going to be a tough sell this year. Whoever plays quarterback has 10 starters returning. The O-line returns 6 guys who at some point have been starters, so there's a plus there. I like Paul Perkins. I think Paul Perkins, as I've said many times before, and we'll say many times until we're done covering the conferences, that when you're in that in-between period with quarterbacks and you have to adjust, more of the emphasis is going to be put on the running game. So I think Perkins is in a good position to see his best production yet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, you're just going to, Ross or whoever the quarterback might be, you're just going to turn on hand the ball off. Receiver-wise, Jordan Payton, I mean, he's probably going to be the number one guy. But again, if the quarterback is inconsistent, you can't say that any of the receivers are going to be consistent because you can't do that.
I thought that was kind of a big deal, too, because last year this team seemed to be full of receivers, and this year it just seems to be Peyton.
Yeah.
I mean, you discussed, Devian Lucien moving on to, was it Arizona State?
Arizona State, yeah.
I don't know. Defensively, I think that they could potentially be more competitive. They weren't horrible last year, but they have a tough schedule. So it's tough to really see how dramatic they can improve. Overall, I think it'll just be a few spots. But with the resurgence of the program we'll talk about next, I don't know. I don't know how much I like this UCLA team. I think we're on the same page where I think it could be more talk than actual substance.
Yeah, and I think the defensive side of the ball, you look at Miles Jack. I mean, he is literally offense, defense. He does everything. So he is the number one guy in the defense. But, yeah, I agree. I don't know how this team can get over that hump. And they've lost a lot of talent the past couple years to the NFL, and they have a lot of good talent. But with the resurgence of USC, it's taken a lot of recruits away from UCLA, and that hurts them depth-wise more than anything.
I think I did read some interview that said that there would be up to 8 different players playing both ways at UCLA, though.
Yeah, which is, I don't care how good the athlete is at the college level, you can't have that. You have to go recruit somebody that can play that role and let, whether it be Miles Jack or whoever it might be, let them focus on the position that they're best at. And in Jack's situation, it's, the defensive side of the ball.
Sure. Moving on, we'll go to USC. In 2014, they had the 15th ranked passing offense, the 68th ranked rushing offense, the 31st ranked overall offense, the 118th ranked passing defense, the 27th ranked rushing defense, the 78th ranked overall defense. They scored 35.8 points and they allowed 25.2. And one of our favorite players, Cody Kessler, should have an amazing year this year, even with losing guys like Nelson Aguilar and Buck Allen.
Yeah, I mean, when you return a guy that can complete 69.7% of his passes last year, 39 touchdowns, 5 picks, I'd take that any day of the week. I don't care who the receivers are. He'll make stars. But I could not be higher on this USC team. I see them in the Final Four. I think Cody Kessler is a Heisman. At the end of the season, he's definitely in New York at the Heisman ceremony. So this team has just talent and the experience to win a title.
Kessler turned down an opportunity to go to the NFL, as did the center for this team. So that's a plus. This offensive line is going to be very strong. The questions become: are the losses of Buck Allen and Nelson Aguilar going to be too much for this team to get over?
Yeah, I mean, the running back position is an issue for me. I mean, Justin Davis and Trey Madden will probably share the running back roles. I don't know if one will have a more prominent role than the other. But, yeah, the offensive line is strong. The quarterback is strong. So it should have opportunities. The opportunity should present itself for the running backs to have some big runs.
Yeah, I like Justin Davis in the backfield. I don't think he's going to put up numbers like Allen did, but I think that on the receiving end, Juju Smith and Adoree Jackson, I don't know why, I just really think both of these guys could have big years, specifically Juju. Kessler's an awesome quarterback, and it's going to be a test without having his safety net and Aguilar being there if he can hit that same level of production. I personally think he can. I think this is going to be one of the funnest offenses to watch. Hopefully this defense can turn things around. It wasn't exactly spectacular in 2014. I mean, it was just slightly below average. You're hoping that the defensive backs can turn it around so that they're not getting gashed like they seemed to get last year. The recruiting has been better as I believe their sanctions are finally done.
Yeah, finally they have a full allotment of scholarships and practice time and everything's back to normal at USC.
So hopefully that will be a good indicator and this team will be able to, take it to the next level.
Yeah, I think the linebacking core, Rick Cravens and Lamar Dawson, are you talk about guys that improved in the spring, and watching the USC spring game and reading what I've read, those two guys have really taken that next step and have really shown that they can be the defensive leaders. But you're right about the defensive backfield; they have to get better. I mean, they got burned on certain plays, and they got caught looking in the backfield, and as defensive backs, you can't be doing that. So another year in that system and another year of experience, I think this defense will be good enough to get them into the Final Four.
Finally, we will end with the Utes. You remember my cousin Vinny, the Utes?
I do. Yeah.
The Utes. So the Utah Utes, 2014, 95th ranked passing offense, the 41st ranked rushing offense, the 79th ranked overall offense, the 93rd ranked passing defense, the 41st ranked rushing defense, the 60th ranked overall defense. They scored 31.3 points. They allowed 24.9. What do you think is going to happen in Utah with the Utes?
I think that you start and stop with the running back, Devontae Booker, right? I mean, he came out of nowhere. So I don't see him having less than 1,500 yards. I mean, do you agree?
They're going to have to, considering Kalen Kay, Wesley Tonga, and Dre Anderson are all gone. That is a lot of production that has to be made up for. And it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, so why not Booker, right? I mean, he proved last year that he can do it. Kenneth Scott on the outside as a receiver has proven that, he can be the guy when needed to be called upon. So this is an intriguing team. I don't know if they can compete with the top 3 to 4 teams, but I think they're on their way, if that makes any sense.
I'm not a big fan. I'm just going to be honest. I like Kenneth Scott and Bubba Poole at the wide receiver position. Quarterback position's tough. There's, is it Wilson? Is it Thompson? I'm not really sure. I don't think production overall is going to be that great as it is. I do think that most of the emphasis is going to be on Devontae Booker. But does he just become too much of an obvious that they don't have anywhere else to go? I do think Kenneth Scott is talented enough that he's able to take the focus off of Booker, so we're not talking about a one-trick pony offense, and that's good. Overall, though, I don't know. I think they're definitely in the bottom part of this division.
Yeah, I think they're on their way. They have some good talent there. They have a good coach. But you're right. I don't know if they'll ever be able to compete with the big boys in the Pac-12. Their defense just has no real standouts. They're just there. So, I think they're good and they have some talent, but I just don't know where the wins are coming from when you're facing, USC's, UCLA, Arizona State. If they were in the, Mountain West or something like that, I could see this team competing for a league title. But in the Pac-12, I just see them in the bottom half.
Total agreement there. So that brings us to the final point that we have to make. Who are you going to go with on this side of the conference as the representative?
For me, it's USC. I mean, there's no questions asked. I would like to see you debate how you don't put USC there.
I'm not going to debate because I'm as high on USC as anyone you're going to find. So I think this is going to be their return to relevance. I think they're going to put everything that happened in the past and not worry about it. And, Kessler is going to have a major, he's going to have a lot to prove, and he's going to give him he's going to improve his draft stock this year. Let's put it that way.
Without a doubt. And now with that being said, who do you see taking the Pac-12 title?
So my game would be Stanford and USC, and ironically enough, they do play each other during the season, and both times with very little hesitation, I see USC.
Yeah, I have USC and Oregon, and I have USC. I think USC and Oregon, whoever wins that game, they're going to the Final Four. If things play out certain ways, I think both teams can go. But I think USC wins that game.
If Mariota was still there, what would you say?
Oh, man. That's a blindsided me with that question. But I would say USC still. Wow. Are you saying Oregon from last year or Oregon with this team?
Oregon with this team.
I'd say USC. I would still say USC. I love Mariota. I think he's going to have a great NFL career, but I think USC is just that much better this year. Just my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's ironic that I'm so high on USC, and I think that a Mariota-led Oregon team this year would take them down. From my perspective, what makes me believe that is just the idea that Mariota would be returning so many weapons. There's just not enough gone from that Oregon team from last year that would make me really question their ability to do it this year. It's not really worth a discussion because it's not happening. But I just think that's an interesting scenario. Because
one player can make that big of a difference in college.
Yes, it can, because I wouldn't be saying Stanford would be going. I would definitely be saying that, it would be Oregon. And further than that, like you said that this year you think there's a very out there scenario where both teams could still make it even if one of them lost.
Yeah.
I don't personally see that scenario, but I definitely think if Mariota were involved, yes, I would see that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, my only position on that, and I'm not going to firmly say that it could happen, but, if USC is undefeated and they lose close to Oregon and Oregon has one loss, maybe, I don't know. It's
too much of it depends on what happens outside of the Pac-12.
100%. And again, that's all hypothetical, but
we could be sitting here at the end of the year with 0 undefeated teams, 0 one-loss teams, and a whole different landscape than we've been used to in the last several years.
Right. So while it's not likely, I can make an argument for it where I can't make that argument for other teams in the nation.
I think the only other situation, there would be two situations that I could see potentials in. The most likely scenario would be Michigan State, Ohio State, where if Michigan State went undefeated, Ohio State, or if Michigan State, whoever, disregard. I think
they're on the same side too, which makes that argument.
Well, what I was trying to say is, if Michigan State lost to Ohio State, or the or the opposite, and then that team won the conference title, then I think if they both have one loss, there's an argument to be made that because the Ohio State team is just honestly so strong.
Right.
But that is also predicated on something else in college football happening to where there are a lack of better one-loss options. The other situation would be, and this is the one I don't think is as realistic because they don't have a conference championship, and because they don't have that, that last week of voting will never favor them. Unless the dramatic happens, and that's Baylor and TCU. You're sitting with two of the top four teams right now. They can both go undefeated until the final week of the season. If they both go undefeated to the final week of the season, and you're talking about, two one-loss teams and, that fourth seed potentially being either whoever lost between TCU and Baylor and a two-loss team, that's where I think you have the potential for both of those teams to get in.
Yeah, it is a possible scenario. It's exciting because there's a lot of scenarios out there with this 14 playoff that you can make arguments for a lot of teams in a lot of different situations. And I really hope we're sitting here in late December going, there are 7 teams that you can make an argument for, because that would be so much fun to talk about and to watch play out.
It would be exciting. How exciting would it be for that TCU Baylor game on November 27th, for TCU to win that game, get ranked number 1, this is all hypotheticals, and then have Baylor end up getting ranked 4th.
Yeah.
As being, it's a scenario that could literally work out like that.
Yeah, because what if that situation happens, they're 1-2, both undefeated, say, Baylor loses, and say somebody gets upset in the Big Ten, say Ohio State gets upset, and say somehow USC gets upset, and you're looking at like number 15 and number 25, have the automatic bids, and they just upset. I mean, it is a possible situation. It's not likely, but there's a lot of fun things with this 14 playoff. There's a lot of fun situations that could happen.
Absolutely. And if people want to talk scenarios with you, where can they find you?
You can always talk fun situations with me. It doesn't have to be college football. It could be any situation at CFB Pros Drew. And if they want to talk maybe more serious with you, where can they find you at?
Find me on Facebook at College Football Pros, on Twitter at CFB Pros, on the World Wide Web at www.cfbpros.com. All right, well, we have wrapped up our content for this week. We will be back next week with some more exciting content. Until then, be easy.